Let's go back to one of our earlier guests, Siviwe Kwahube, who's joining us live now again. And Siviwe, it's incredible what difference 33 minutes can make. When you and I spoke earlier, we didn't have this news that the health minister was going to be placed on special leave. Now it's happened. Is the president finally showing that he's got a handle on the situation?
Yeah, Tembegile, look, we've noted the announcement by the president, and of course it is one half step towards the right direction. Of course, we were of the view that a suspension was needed, but ultimately having the minister placed on special leave, we think it at least will alleviate the chances of having any undue political influence when it comes to the investigation of the SIU. And so we're not throwing the whole thing out and saying it's completely inadequate. Of course, it would have been a far more stronger action to suspend the minister because these allegations are quite serious. But we are welcoming the fact that this, the minister won't now be presiding over a department that he is said to have been alleged to awarded a contract in.
And I suppose on the principle that the idea is to make sure that the minister's presence doesn't continue to linger over the department, even if it's temporarily, as all of this is investigated, that raises the question of whether it matters at this point if it was a suspension or special leave, because ultimately he's not there anymore for the time being.
Absolutely, of course, but Tembegile, obviously, it does also raise questions around the president's ability to make very difficult decisions. Because when people are alleged to have done what the minister is alleged to have done, you would want, as a president who speaks very tough on corruption, to act very tough on corruption and say it will not be tolerated, and until such a time that you have been cleared, you'll be suspended. But as I've said, that at the very least, we have the minister removed from the post so that the SIU can do its work. And now what's more important now is going to have to be continuity and having the role of the deputy minister augmented so that there can be continuity in this portfolio. Because as you know, the issue around the vaccination is a big crisis in our country, and we've got to make sure that that goes on and with or without the political head.
You referenced the Deputy Health Minister. The statement from the Presidency this afternoon says the Tourism Minister, Mamuluko Ngubane, will now be Acting Health Minister. Is that the right choice?
Look, I mean, it's completely the prerogative of the minister, of the president on who gets appointed to the executive. I think what's going to be incredibly important is going to have to be the synergy between the administration and the political head. Because, of course, there are many moving parts when it comes to the rollout of this vaccine. We've got to make sure that the provinces are on side, and we've got to make sure that the provinces are ready to roll out the vaccine. And also, we've got to make sure that these timelines that the president and the minister have set are met. And so what's more important to us more than the actual figure is whether or not between the DG, the administration, and the deputy minister and the current acting minister, there is some movement when it comes to these timelines, because we are facing a third wave. We can't let the allegations against one person really derail us from a process that's already been absolutely inexcusably too slow.
I'm wondering, Siviwe, if it's possible to separate the two, the minister's handling of the COVID-19 response by government overall and the allegations over digital vibes, which he denies any involvement in, given that when we first read that investigative report by Scorpio, a lot of people said, well, we were incredibly impressed with how he was doing. He appeared to be on top of issues and had the understanding scientifically, precisely because he is a qualified medical doctor, and now here we are.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, and this is the thing. I mean, I think, while there may have been really laudable parts of our response of COVID-19, particularly right at the beginning, the reality is that it doesn't matter how well, regardless of what we think or how well the minister had performed. The fact that the person who's leading the response of COVID-19 in the country has allegations of this nature hanging over them, in effect, it makes them unsuitable to lead the response anymore, because we've got a situation where the SIU has confirmed that over 14 billion rand of public money is the subject of their investigations around COVID-19 alone. And ultimately, I mean, the ministers, unless he's cleared of this, the reality is that it doesn't matter what he's done up until this point. If he's not cleared of these allegations, then we've got a problem. Then he's no longer suitable to lead this response.
Cleared or not, do you think the health minister can actually ever come back from these allegations? Let's say if he were to be cleared.
Look, I mean, we on our side, we are looking forward to hearing what the SIU has said and the recommendations that they've put. We have lodged a criminal, we've laid some criminal charges with the South African Police Service against him and the DG. And as of today, we have laid an ethics complaints with the Ethics Committee in Parliament. And so really ours, Thembekile, is not about whether or not Dr. Zweli Mkhize can salvage himself out of this. Ours is about accountability and recuperating the money that was lost and back into the health system. And so what we want to be able to see is that he can, if he is cleared and ultimately held accountable if not cleared for his role, and also that we can see that that public money is sent back where it needs to be.
The criminal matter, you've now laid this complaint with police in Cape Town. We've seen political parties such as the DA do this time and again over government officials who are accused of one thing or the other. The reaction last week was very much from some people that, look, we've seen this before, nothing actually ever comes of it. What do you say to that?
Look, it would be completely wrong of us, Thembekile, to give up on our institutions. Ultimately, the SAPS has a role to play and has a role to play particularly on this matter. We are of the view that the minister, if indeed these allegations are true, he has broken at least 3 sections of the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act, and the DG would be, if in fact these allegations are true, would be guilty of having contravened the PFMA, both of which are subject to criminal investigation. And so it really would be unfortunate if we were to start, because of how institutions in the past have behaved, if we were to start giving up on their ability to hold people accountable. And so for all my sins, and whether or not it is naive, I'm of the view that these institutions exist for a reason, and ultimately we need to be able to use them and report people to the police, and so that they can be treated as equally as anyone else in the country who would break the law. And so I don't think it's a waste at all. I think ultimately if the police also want to salvage their image, they need to act like they would in any other case, and they can be cooperating with the SIU, and we can have a situation where the criminal justice system works.
On the DG then, should he too tender or be suspended, I should say, or step aside for a period of this special leave, as it's being called?
You see, and this is now then the difficulty, Thembekile, with the special leave and the suspension, because it now seems as though, the special leave only applies to the minister. And now it's unclear where the DG would fit in the situation. Because, of course, if we look at the facts and what has been reported, it seems as though the DG himself could have been guilty of gross misconduct or negligence for not acting against, or at least not reporting the matter to Treasury if an executive authority like a minister was seeking to get politically involved in a contract. And the PFMA is very clear on that. And that's why we've laid this complaint with the SAPS. And so now, ultimately, we've got to see, we've got to be able to see, because now the same principle applies. If the DG is sitting in his office and the SIU is combing through the department, will there be undue pressure placed on the SIU? But ours was obviously targeting very much on the minister, because we know what undue political pressure can do to independent state institutions. And so we were really wanting to make sure that the minister is no longer there in the duration of this investigation. But if the DG himself is also guilty of of having neglected to carry out his duties, he must be held accountable. And so we look forward to seeing what that SIU report says at the end of the month. And based on the recommendations that they make to the president, we will be able to take this up so that we can make sure that people aren't scapegoated for something that was done by a select few.
Very quickly then, Severe, based on the way the hearing or the session descended into party political divisions when the Health Portfolio Committee heard from the DG on Friday at a meeting that, by the way, was initially said to have been going to be addressed by the Health Minister. He didn't pitch based on legal advice at the time. Do you trust Parliament to deal with this matter, these allegations, in a fair and transparent process?
Look, I mean, that was a deeply embarrassing meeting because time and time again in the Zondo Commission, the Concourt, Parliament has been really lambasted for not upholding its constitutional obligations. And so we have today actually a legal opinion which was commissioned by the committee to talk about whether or not the sub judice rule applies to this particular issue. And the state law advisor has come back and said that's absolutely not true, that the minister should have been there to account for these allegations, and that we can't use the sub judice rule to really shield people from accountability. And so we are hoping again that the Ethics Committee can do what the Portfolio Committee of Health failed to do. We are encouraged by the comments by Cedric Frolic over the weekend, saying that in fact the committee should have done its work and should have held the minister to account. And so I'm hoping that the Ethics Committee will agree to investigate this matter, and we will be keeping an eye on it.
Democratic Alliance MP Severe Mkhize joining us in this immediate reaction to news from the Presidency of the special leave. That's what's happened with Health Minister Zweli Mhkize. He's been placed on special leave by the President over Digital Vibes contract allegations. We'll continue to get your reaction from various other parties in Parliament, as well as political analysis on what this means, not just from Mkhize, but President Cyril Ramaphosa himself.